then there's a converge stage where it actually does the actual deployment of the app. Okay, so we've done installing Micro Kubernetes. So what we're doing here now, we're adding Ubuntu to the Micro Kubernetes group. That way, Ubuntu as a user can talk to the Kubernetes instance. Okay. Okay, so we've completed that step. So at this point, we're here in the process. So we're enabling necessary Micro Kubernetes add-ons. Specifically, we're enabling the host path storage, so we can use the hard drive on the local machine as it, basically for demo purposes as our storage. We're also enabling DNS on the local Kubernetes cluster. That way we can actually talk to outside services. So let's let those add-ons get enabled. Okay, that's coming along. So let's go here. So at this point, we have a Kubernetes cluster here. We have an Ubuntu virtual machine here. It's been assigned this following IP addresses. So let's do this. Let's log into that virtual machine. So I'm going to do multipath shell, Jannah, charm, operator. Okay. So what I'm doing here, I say, okay, there's a virtual machine running locally on my laptop, and I'm using multipath as basically my tool for managing local virtual machines, and then I use that same tool to shell into that operator VM. So if I do that, that should put me into the virtual machine. Oh, okay. So it's starting the virtual machine. So okay. So what this does, okay. So after we create the virtual machine and install Kubernetes, we restart the virtual machine. So what you're seeing here is that machine getting shut down and restarted again. Okay. So that once the machine is restarted, as part of so now we're in this prepare stage here. So we're done creating. Now what we're doing is we're preparing. So part of the prepare is we install Juju, right? And Juju is how we manage things on a cloud from a local computer, right? So think of Juju as a controller onto a Kubernetes environment, specifically for charms. It's a fancy kubectl. So Juju is here. If you want to learn about Juju and Juju operators, check them out. It's juju.is. That's the name of their website. Check them out. It's a pretty cool framework for basically writing Python-based operators. Okay, so it's installed Juju. It's checking to see what clouds do we have right now on that cluster. So when you do Juju clouds, it will show you the available clouds that have been created into that cluster. Okay, so you could see here we have a local LXD container running, but we also have a Micro Kubernetes instance running on the cluster. So if I'm sitting here now on that machine, I should be able to say kubectl get pods, right? So right now, this is what our cluster look like. It's just we've installed our controller. So this is the Jannah controller. This is basically a local agent that sits on the cluster on behalf of Jannah. So when Jannah want to administer any command on that cluster, it will be through this controller that Jannah will send commands, and that controller will then execute commands for us on that cluster. Let's go back here. So what we're doing now, we're bootstrapping the controller and the model. So the way charm operators work is you have to create a model for your app. So a model is basically a namespace, right? So in the Kubernetes, when you deploy applications in Kubernetes, you deploy them under a namespace. So in the charm world, they say create a model. The model is basically a namespace, and all the components of your app will be deployed under that namespace, which is basically how they model applications, right? So Juju's model of applications in the Kubernetes is the namespace. So the namespace is the overarching umbrella, and under that namespace, you will deploy various services. So in the Juju world, they call that your model, the app model. So this is an operation that takes a little bit to run. So what we've done here, we're giving it 1600 seconds to run. So what we do, because it's running in this task is what you would call an asynchronous task in Ansible. So what it does, so I give it a maximum time to run of 1600 seconds. But then every 3 seconds, I do a pull to say, are you done running or are you still running? Then if it's running, then I wait for 3 more seconds. I check again to say, are you done? Until it's finished, then I continue to the next step. So all of this you've seen here is every 3 seconds we check to see when we add the model, it's basically creating we're adding a namespace that's attached to a controller, and then we check. So okay, so that's completed. Okay. So we've bootstrapped. Let's go here. Okay. So you could see here, we have a controller running. This is the Juju controller. This is our Juju model. Okay. So after that, we do a check status. So you could see here, we have our Juju model and our Juju controller running on this Micro Kubernetes environment of version 3.0.3. And here's the timestamp where we used to deploy it. So after we deploy our controller and the model into the Kubernetes cluster, there's a few other things we need to install on the virtual machine itself. So this is just stuff I need for day-to-day development when I'm using virtual machines. So I need Python 3 installed on the virtual machine. I need pip3 installed on the virtual machine. And I need, the Python virtual environment command also installed on the virtual machine. This is just stuff I use day-to-day. So I just install it there, just, as part of my, day-to-day, debugging work, development work. Not necessarily for production, but let that install. So it's executing this task right now. This is an Ansible task that's getting executed right now. It's doing an APT upgrade. Okay, so that's done. So what it's doing now, it's doing an APT install. It's installing Python 3, development flavor. It's installing pip3 and virtual env. So let that get installed, and then we'll continue on to the next step in this demo, which would be to basically pack the operator code base. So after we install this tooling, the next thing would be to say, okay, all of this code we have sitting here will be bundled into a file similar to this file here. So we're creating what's called a charm file. So what a charm file is, it takes your entire code base, it bundles it into a container. That container is then deployed into a cluster, a Kubernetes cluster. And once that container is deployed, events will be fired as soon as the container starts running. And when those events are ready is what you see here. So there's a file here called, this is the Jannah charm here, right? So it's subclassing the charm base. All right, so all of this is, we're using charm base, right?